Powered by Red Media in partnership with TSN, it is Season 5, wrapping up Season 5 of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast, presented by our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey, who I've asked so many times over the last number of weeks, have you tried the Canadian Club Ginger Ale? And if not, why not? You need to. Crisp, refreshing alternative to beer. As Ray knows, well-balanced flavors. There's the ginger, there's the subtle notes, Ray, of rye and spice. And because you're so health conscious, 30% less sugar, 20% fewer calories, and we can absolutely confirm it's delicious, the Canadian Club Ginger Ale.
We can, and it's the drink for summer. It is July the 2nd. For those of us knuckleheads that work in this business, it is summer. It is time for Canadian Club.
Well, and I thought of cracking one open, just in the spirit of this being the final podcast of the season, Season 5. But you know what? We're recording at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific time. That might have been a tad aggressive even for day one of the holidays. So, but it's in the near future.
It's right there. As soon as you're on your way, though, aren't you? You're like,
I'm not, again, you teased me, I don't even know what podcast, 2 or 3 ago when I was belly aching a little bit about the travel, right? And look, it goes by very, very quickly. But to go from Game 6 to Game 7, and then from Fort Lauderdale to Vegas, which, by the way, there was a stop in Houston, as we talked about, and then take the red eye Saturday night after the draft out of Vegas to Toronto. I walked in my door at 8:30 Eastern on Sunday morning. And then, we've got July 1st, free agency tomorrow. So it's been a little hair on fire for me. And I'm not conditioned for this. You're a well-traveled, well-conditioned human being. Last 2 weeks has been a bit of a struggle. I'm not
but you're
good, but struggle.
Yeah, to say you're at the finish line, you're past the finish line now. You're on vacation. You're going to get out of there. You're going to get out of home in, I don't know, a couple hours. You're going to be on the road to the Cabbage. You're going to have your big Tim Hortons sitting in the truck, right in the cup holder. You're set to go. Who controls the music? You or Holly?
We kind of have an in-truck code, and it's who's ever driving. And trust me when I tell you, it's the primary reason I drive 99% of the trip.
It's music?
She likes the classical stuff. And I'm not talking about classical rock. I'm talking about like orchestra music.
I can see you enjoying that.
Jeez.
Do you know what? Okay.
Anyway.
I'm going to tell you one thing, because the car is no place for couples.
No.
You know what Cammie likes to do? If it's raining, she likes to reach over and turn the wipers up. I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, well, I don't like looking through the window. I go, I don't care. I'm driving. Like,
get your hands off these things.
I like the slower wiper thing. She likes hers going like the Indy 500. It drives me wild. But she needs to, I go, just keep your hands on that side of the cabin over there.
So speaking of Cammie, Ray, the Vancouver Canucks table in the Sphere was maybe 25 feet from the fence of where the media area was.
Yeah.
So for 2 full days, Cammie had her back to me. And I searched high and low. I went to a Walgreens in Vegas looking for one of those old Bic pens. Remember the ones that you could pull the pen
such
out?
a donkey.
I was just gonna sit there and go just fire some spitballs.
Do you remember that pen was the best? You had to take the blue top off.
Yeah.
And then get the pen. How many times did you lose the plastic holder and you'd be stuck in school writing with just like the insert? But those were good spitball shooters.
Oh, terrific.
Well, the first day they didn't have anything to do. You could have done that.
No,
you didn't have a pick.
I felt bad for her. She sat there like stoically.
Oh, what are you going to do?
Posture is tremendous.
What are you going to do? Right?
Are you alive? Are you alive?
But it turned out to be a hell of a week, guys. I mean, from the draft to yesterday,
crazy.
Wild.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Have you been to the Sphere?
I have not.
Okay. I mean, chances are you'll be in Vegas for games or whatever in the not too distant future. But Holy smokes, was that cool. It was unreal.
Now, were you up a little higher, Drakes? Because from what I understand, if you're down low, like Cammy was saying, you look up and it's like, whoa, there's a lot there.
Yeah, we were on the floor just like, all of the clubs.
Yeah.
But where we shot our TV hits was in the 100 level. So it was slightly above. But, we were offered a tour to go up to the 7th floor, which is apparently where you want to be, right?
Okay.
Because then you're taking all in. But everybody that came down from there after that trek said it's nauseating. Like if you have any concern with heights, like you got the knee wobbles, your stomach is rolling. I'm like, I'm not going up there.
Yeah, maybe I don't need to be in the sphere then. But I'm going to go. I got to get there. I want to see it.
All right, man, was it busy on July 1st, and free agency obviously is still open. So we got a whack of stuff to get through here. In headlines, brought to you by Tim Hortons. By popular demand, Tim's has brought back the Walnut Crunch and the Dutchie, along with 2 new Tim Hortons retro donuts, right? The Blueberry Sour Cream donut, which I have not tried yet and will, and of course, the Sugar Twist. So on the list, as you say, as we rip through the drive-through, get in the truck, and head west for the summer. No particular order. I mean, we could start with the Canadian teams because there's just intriguing headlines across Canada, but I felt it was appropriate to start with the Nashville Predators. Man, did Barry Trotz get a pile of work done. He had Steven Stamkos after Julian Breezeball and the Tampa Bay Lightning do borderline the unthinkable. I mean, just reminding us it is business first. Even iconic individuals like Steven Stamkos can get moved along, and that's what happened there. So Stamkos now with the Preds. Jonathan Marchessault leaves Vegas. Brady Skjei is now with the Preds. They added goaltender Scott Wedgwood. They extended Alex Carrier. I mean, that's some tidy work. Like, there was a lot of ads across the league, but the Nashville Predators should be a lot better, shouldn't they?
They should. I mean, eye-popping to add 3 big ticket items. Yeah. That's a lot of money. Of course, I've been thinking about this, and I think we got to talk about this first, is that free agency is, I think, almost ahead of the trade deadline in angst for teams and fans.
Yeah.
The problem with both is that there's only so many players that are available. This is so obvious, but it kind of just gets overlooked. There's only so many players available. If you want, I don't know, a centerman, how many centermen were available yesterday? Like, if you're looking at the top end, how many centers were available? That's the first piece.
Yeah.
The second piece is, do you have the cap space to compete for this guy or these guys?
Yeah.
The third piece is, maybe if you identify the player and you do have the cap space and you want the player, maybe the player doesn't want to live in your city. Maybe he doesn't want to live on that side of the country. Maybe your team, which really needs a center, isn't at the same stage as where the player is.
Yeah.
And so all of those things add up to, a team would like to do something, but the pieces don't fit. The pieces don't work. And so teams get left out in the cold and fans get pissed. And but that's the way it is, because there's not enough players or money or fit to go around. So I will say this about the Nashville thing. Like, I mean, when they got both Marchessault and Stamkos, it makes you stand up and look. I really, to take a little bit of a devil's advocate to it, you've got 3 right shot power play shooters in Marchessault, Stamkos, and Forsberg, Philip Forsberg, who had a 40-goal year, tremendous player. So you got 3 of them. They're all right-handed. Yeah. They all have the ego of a goal scorer, which all goal scorers have ego, because you have to have it to be a goal scorer. Yeah. And there's 1 power play and there's 1 puck. And in my mind, they're still short in the middle of the ice. You're asking Tommy Novak to be your number 2 center in some form with Nyquist, Forsberg, Marchessault, Stamkos. Now, they must feel he can do that, or they must feel that Stamkos can play a little bit of center, which Tampa did not think, because they had Stamkos almost exclusively on the wing. I found it interesting they went for both of those guys, Marchessault and Stamkos. Brady Skjei's a good player, and he's big and he's mobile and he can skate. Like, skate and mobile are two different things, and he's both. I like that a lot for them. Wedgwood's a solid backup. He's an upgrade on Kevin Lankinen, and they got Carrier re-signed. They liked him a lot, and he got he kind of battled his way to a 3-year deal. But the headliners are the two wingers, and that's Stamkos and Marchessault.
And perhaps more coming, right? Askarov is on the trade block. Trotz was looking for a top 10 pick at the draft and didn't get it. So there's a useful piece that maybe he can continue.
Eventually, they're going to run out of money there. I mean,
eventually.
They got to be close to the cap. I don't know where they're at, but they got to be tight to it now.
Yeah. Speaking of that, the Edmonton Oilers are over the cap, and that's something that they can address. They'll move out CC or McLeod, or who knows what happens with Evander Kane. But without a general manager, Jeff Jackson did some maneuvering and some adding as well. The Leafs and Oilers were the two teams primarily in near the finish line, and Jeff Skinner was bought out by the Buffalo Sabres. So
a lot of teams interested in Skinner when he became available.
Yeah.
And you know what I will say about Skinner, to jump here? I think he's going to have a good year.
Okay.
He's never been in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Never. Which is crazy. Remarkable. He's an in and out player.
Yeah.
Like, when he's in or on it, he's a really dangerous player. He's going to be in a position here to play with a pretty terrific player.
Oh boy.
And you've got 1 year.
Yeah.
The teams that were in on Skinner all thought, I believe, the same thing. We got a motivated guy that can play. And you don't need him to be your number one lead dog scorer right here. And so I thought that was a really good piece that maybe gets snowed under a little bit with the volume of players that signed.
Yeah. So on top of that, they bring in Victor Arvidsson. Nice ad, right? Matthias Janmark re-ups. Adam Henrique kind of went around the circle. Winnipeg offered, I think, 3.5 times 2 for Henrique. Tampa Bay, John Cooper gave Henrique a call. Coaches do that, right? Like when you're trying to lure a free
they do now.
agent, they do now.
They didn't in the past. They do now, and it's a really good tool.
Sure. Tampa Bay doesn't have the money, right? But I know that the Lightning was an intriguing option for Henrique. St. Louis came in late. There were a number of teams that explored interest in Adam Henrique, and he goes back to the Oil. Corey Perry, that was a curious signing or an extension. He's staying in Edmonton. But they obviously saw enough in Corey Perry to give him 1.4. Couple of Browns, Connor stays, Josh is brought in. Overall, I thought Jeff Jackson had a pretty solid, productive day, don't you?
Well, I think so, because the cap, we talked about it first. It goes without saying, team to team to team. They don't have room. They don't have a lot of room. So they have to hope that guys that they had that they're familiar with want to take a short-term deal for money that they can afford. And that happened with Brown and Janmark. So, I think those players are so valuable because they can fill a couple of different spots for you, and they don't have a big ego, and so they don't need a lot of minutes. I think we saw, the best of Connor Brown was late in the year, and so
it was,
they'll think, hey, we got a summer of training ahead, and we'll probably get a little more offense out of him. I think you will anyway. I think he's a good player. Janmark's a handy guy. If Arvidsson can stay healthy, and he's had back issues that have really curtailed him, but if he can stay healthy, that guy can score. He can shoot and he can scoot. And there's no question the team that went to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final is better today than they were before. Josh Brown, he'll replace Darnay. He's big. He's not a particularly smooth player, but he's rugged. And I think one thing that teams always realize is when you wander your way through the playoffs, you need some size. You need that element to be available. And I thought Edmonton had a good day.
I agree. I thought they did as well. Likewise for the Toronto Maple Leafs, right? I mean, Brad Treliving is trying to put his fingerprints on this team. I mean, really this year and going into this offseason and next year is his first real crack at, the changes that he brought in for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So he adds Chris Tanev via trading for his rights. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, will help them on that power play. You've got Yanni Hakanpää, who is enormous, right? If he can stay healthy, nice big guy on the back end. Anthony Stolarz.
If you're talking about enormous, have you been near the ice when that guy's on it? He's like an eclipse out there. I think he's 6'7".
Yeah.
And we'll get to the other guys, but I'll tell you why I like this kid is he's fought his way, from a good prospect in Philly, and he kind of lost his way and rediscovered himself a little bit in Anaheim, and he gets to Florida and has a knock it out of the park year. So and he's a really good guy, a really good person. So I was happy for him. Comes off a Stanley Cup, and now here he is. He's got a real chance.
But that should matter to the Leafs too, though, right? Now, we just mentioned Stolarz skimmed over OEL, but the fact that they're just fresh Stanley Cup champions being introduced to that room in Toronto, that matters, right? Like that level of experience.
It gives you some sway for sure. Like people are going to look at, hey, you guys won. What was it like? You start talking about it as opposed to a bunch of guys. On most of these guys that, of course, didn't win last year. For years, Dregs, we've been complaining about the Leafs. You got to improve your blue line. You've got to get bigger. You got to get stronger. And they did it. Now, I'm still a little unsure how the 6 years at 4.5 works for Tanev, but that's something for you to discuss and dissect at some point.
Yeah. Have you heard of LTIRA?
Yeah.
Robida Island.
It's like they have so many things where they step on teams' toes and say, you can't do this and you can't do that.
Yeah.
This would seem rather obvious where this is going to end up. Yeah. I don't quite get it. I don't quite get how it's okay, but it is. So I don't care anymore. Because it's okay, I don't care anymore. Tanev is a hell of a player. And he's a terrific person. Everywhere he's been, teams, players, coaches, they love the guy. OEL showed more bite in the final than I remembered him.
Yeah.
I was quite impressed with him. How about him? Last year at this time, he gets bought out. I mean, he's hobbled. He can barely move around. His contract's too big, so Vancouver's got to buy him out. He gets healthy, has a really good year in Florida, wins a Stanley Cup, now signs a 3-year deal. Like, how fast does that move, right? If Hakanpää can stay healthy to play 14 to 16 minutes, I think that's his sweet spot. In Dallas, they got into a place where they needed him to play much more, and I thought that wasn't a good spot for him. Yeah. They missed him in the playoffs.
Sure they did.
If he's healthy, that changes the outlook of their team a little bit. So they get Joe Wool extended, they get Domi extended, Liljegren as well. I liked their day yesterday. I think they changed the way their team physically is able to play, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and extend Domi, as you mentioned. I mean, it ultimately comes at the expense of Tyler Bertuzzi. You can't, he couldn't afford both Domi and Bertuzzi.
I'd love to sit there, Drakes. I'd love to sit there and just sit next to Treliving in this case, as he's juggling both Bertuzzi and Domi, and you can't have them both, and you're doing negotiations with both at the same time. Yeah. And you get to a point where you're like, it's like a teeter-totter, right? Like, this guy's too heavy. He's going down. Oh, wait a minute. I made some headway there. And I'd love to see how they put the pieces together Because eventually you got to make a decision. You're out on one guy.
For sure. Yeah. All right, Vancouver. Again, Patrick Allvin and the management group of the Vancouver Canucks getting some solid work done here. I've always been a Jake DeBrusk fan. I know that he can be inconsistent. That's fine. But when he is on his game, he's a handful out there, and he can do so many different things, right? And it just feels like he's going to be a fit with the way Rick Tocchet and the coaching staff of the Vancouver Canucks operate. So what do you add? DeBrusk, Heinen, Darnay, Forbort, and Kiefer Sherwood?
Yeah. So with DeBrusk, I think it's so often with players, they've been in a place a long time, and this is not anything about the Bruins. This is about every team, is that after a while, when a guy is there for a long time in a place like Jake was in Boston, you tend to only see what he's not as opposed to what he is. And you go to a new place, and the new place sees what he is, and they haven't really found out firsthand up close what he's not yet. So there's a whole different air around a player. Like, let's not forget, Buffalo just bought out Jeff Skinner, and there's a half a dozen teams falling over themselves to sign him.
Yeah.
They see what he is, not what he isn't. And so Vancouver had to find a winger to play with Pettersson. Part of this whole equation is Pettersson's got to be a lot better than he was last year.
Sure.
And certainly in the last half of the year. I know DeBrusk wanted to move west if he could.
Yeah.
This fits really well. All of a sudden their forwards look a little better, a little deeper, a little more versatile. Heinen's a nice guy that he's from
here.
Good
year in Boston too, right? Like he was better in Boston than I expected, to be fair.
PTO last year. Jim Montgomery moved him around a little bit in the lineup. He plays both sides. He kills penalties. Got a good shot. Should be a 30 to 40 point guy, I think.
Okay.
Can skate. He's from here, so from Vancouver. So that always kind of adds. They love the big D in Vancouver, and so Vinny Darnay gets himself a nice little payday, but not going to break the bank here. But he's got a little bit of Tyler Meyer-ish to him. Yeah. Same size, same hand. And one thing Myers said was that the way that he got coached last year helped him figure out the best part of his game.
Oh,
and so maybe they feel Tocchet and Foote and Gonchar can help Darnay take another step to be an effective guy. They add depth and size with Forbort and him.
Yeah.
They're both penalty killers. They had to replace Cole, right? Like Ian Cole did a really nice job for them last year. They had to replace Zadorov, who gets 30 beans in Boston. So they had to replace some people, and they did it, and they've still got about $3.5 million in cap space.
Yeah. Little bargain shopping now for Patrick Allvin and the staff, for sure.
Yeah, so a good day for them too, I think.
Yeah. We'll get to Ottawa momentarily, but since we're kind of in the Pacific Northwest here, Seattle, Montour and Chandler Stevenson. And I mean, two of the coveted free agents, right? Yesterday. And whether I wouldn't say there's heat on Ron Francis and hockey operations in Seattle, but all ownership groups do get antsy, right? And when
if you spend $1 billion on a building, patience runs a little thin.
It does, and they want to be a playoff team. They expect to be a playoff team, and there is a level of pressure now on management in Seattle to turn that corner and fight your way into the playoffs. Well, Brandon Montour and Chandler Stevenson, they're going to help with that.
You talked about OEL and Stolars with Stanley Cups, right? Coming into the room. The last two Stanley Cup teams are Vegas and Florida. Man, they went long and a lot of money on both of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's a heck of a commitment.
Yeah.
And I guess you have to hope for Seattle that that Montour is 2 years ago Montour and not last year.
Yeah.
And Stevenson, he's a really interesting guy because I remember when he got to Washington, or from Washington to Vegas, they were like shocked with how skilled and fast he was.
Yeah.
When Pete DeBoer was there, he's like, I thought he was a good player, but didn't quite realize he was this. So Seattle has new team holes, and these guys help in many ways. They can move the puck. Montour at his best can provide some more offense, and I think he will. But it'll be, it's an interesting time. Dan Bilesma goes in there, new coach, new style, new system. I think they've got to be a little more, a little higher on the risk reward scale, perhaps, than they were in the past. And playoffs first year, missed the second year. These are big swings for them because they're pricey, and they need to provide offense, and that'll be for Stevenson in particular, not the luxury offense. He's the dependent upon offense, and that's a different place.
Why don't we lump two Eastern Conference teams together? Better teams, top teams, Tampa Bay and Boston. Tampa Bay, of course, swings, hits the grand slam with Jake Gensel, and then the Bruins. They satisfied a couple of needs. They were weak up the middle of the ice. They get the experience of Lindholm. And, as you touched on, they bring in Nikita Zadorov. So Boston improved.
Yeah, so I'll start in Tampa. The story, yes, is Gensel, but the story is Stamkos.
Yeah.
And so pretty clearly they made a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand there's this sentiment of, that the team has to do whatever they can to keep them there, to keep them as a Tampa Bay Lightning for life. And I get all the accomplishments and the way, it'll still not look right watching Stamkos in another jersey. It just won't. But eventually, I guess it sucks. The business part of it, it cannot play second fiddle to emotionality. It just can't.
No.
As much as you'd like it to, it just can't.
Yeah.
And so they clearly feel Jake Gensel has more in front of him than Steven Stamkos does.
Right.
They can frame it any other way, but that's the way they do. They just re-upped Victor Hedman for 4 years at $8 million per. So they've made their choices.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 16 years. It's a hell of a long time. This is what I'm curious about. So I laughed as I'm saying this because I just said the same thing in Nashville where they got 3 right-handed shooters that all want the puck on the power play. Tampa has none.
Yeah.
Remember that power play, best in the league. Part of it is standing in the left circle, and now you got a left-handed guy. Yeah. And that's Jake Gensel, who plays around the front of the net where Nick Paul was really effective.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to play over on the other side? Is that where, did you move Braden Point over there? I guess so, but he's not the shooter that Stamkos is. They're different players. They love Jake Gensel, love the way he competes, love the way he can score. He plays clearly with top-end players all the time and is comfortable with that, but they're going to have to maneuver some things around there, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm really interested to see how that goes for Boston. If they're expecting Lindholm to be an 85-point guy, they got the wrong guy.
Yeah.
He's a 60 to 70 point guy, super smart. Really, he's a good player, really solid. And they're better with him than without. But if they're looking for the guy to really play give and go with Pasternak, I don't know that they've got the right guy.
Right.
Zadorov, I got to meet him and play golf with him after the season. Fascinating person, fascinating. He is ginormous. You can't even believe how big this guy is. He really came into his own, I think. He's always been confident, but the way he played in the playoffs, towards down the stretch and in the playoffs. There was a meeting in early April I was doing a game for the Canucks, and I just happened to be, it was in Arizona. I just happened to be walking by, and Zadorov and Rick Tocchet were in a long conversation. And basically they needed Zadorov to take this next step.
Yeah.
He was scratched, and they needed him to take this step. And he was phenomenal from that point on. And Boston, now you look at their defense and you're like, oof, they're big.
Yeah.
They're much more balanced. The Bruins are better.
Yeah.
Than they were, but they lose DeBrusk, so they lose some offense. They don't have a lot of wingers that can score. So I guess this is a good point. Everybody's got something. Everybody's missing something.
Right.
And you'd like it to all be perfect. It just isn't. But the Bruins are better for sure than they were 48 hours ago. And I think a lot of teams probably feel the same thing about themselves.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've got a few more minutes. I've got to hit the highway here. We got to wrap.
Oh, you do you? Is that why?
Yeah.
Is Holly standing there jangling the keys and saying, "Get going"?
No. She's at the bank. She's looking after us financially, so everything is good.
Ottawa should be.
Jake Chychrun traded to the Washington Capitals for Nick Jensen and a third. They had David Perron and Michael Amadio. Mm-hmm. The Chychrun trade is interesting because I know that Steve Staios was telling other managers in Vegas at the draft that he had a first and a second, but was looking for more for Jake Chychrun. Sounds doubtful that he had a first and a second. If he's good. I mean, Nick Jensen's is a decent player. Don't get me wrong. But what do you? I mean, your thoughts on that trade? Jensen for Chychrun and a third.
Pretty clearly, the market was not what Ottawa
there.
hoped it was going to be. Yeah. And I would say just after how long was Chychrun in Ottawa? Remember, there was all this discussion beforehand about how much he was going to fetch. And I would say the view of Chychrun has faded a bit.
Yeah.
And maybe Washington can find value there that he just seemed like an odd fit in Ottawa, in particular with Sanderson and Chabot there. I know I can play the offside and he does, but he's probably an odd fit. Like too much of the same.
Mm-hmm.
Jensen he's a good skater. He's a steady guy. But he's not a knock it out of the park guy.
No.
So I would say clearly they did not get the shop or the return that they wanted. As far as Perron, man, that guy, he was too slow 10 years ago, and
just finds a way.
Man, he's smart and he's strong and he's apparently like a really good. Like it's one thing to say, "Oh, a guy's going to be a mentor," but you still got to be able to play. Otherwise, you're a coach.
Yeah.
And apparently, he does that really well in the places he's been. And Ottawa is a young, still very, very young.
Yeah.
So I like Perron. His smarts carry him over the day. He just gets it done again.
Yeah.
Amadio, a few years ago, that kid was about ready to break out, and he got hurt, and it really set him back. I like him.
Yeah.
He's not. If you watch him in a skating race, he's going to lose. He's going to lose style points with the way he skates. He's kind of like all over the place.
Yeah.
He is a player. He just knows how to play. He's kind of heavy on the puck. He's got a good shot. He can score a bit. They weren't going to blow it out of the park financially this year.
No.
So I think Ottawa had a decent day, but a downer for sure would be the return on Chychrun.
Yeah, and a tough day for the Winnipeg Jets, by the way. I mean, they tried to extend Sean Monahan. That didn't work. He goes to Columbus. They tried on Henrique, as I mentioned earlier in headlines. That didn't work. They tried on Lizotte. That didn't work. So Chevy's got some lifting to do here.
Well, okay, but so there's a thing too. Some teams, and I think it's just fair to say, they're on their back foot in free agency.
Yeah.
And there are some places that they lose out on players just because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real challenge. And that's why what Cheveldayoff has done in Winnipeg, in my mind, has been remarkable. He's put together good teams, really good teams, year after year after year, and they have to retool, and he figures out a way to do it. And they'll have to do it again here, because Monahan has really revitalized. Good for him, his career after a long stretch injury.
And how about the news dump of the day by the National Hockey League, reinstating Stan Bowman and Joel Quenneville? So good for them. They're able now to resume their careers. I want to connect Stan to Edmonton, in some capacity, if not a candidate for the vacancy of general manager. Maybe he fits in hockey operations in another way, but undoubtedly the Oilers are going to show some interest in Bowman. But just a typical, right? The NHL slid that out there July 1st, expecting that all of us, we've got too much going on to pay attention to the reinstatement of these guys.
Yeah, it's the same as, in the news cycle, like real news, not hockey news. That's the Friday afternoon news dump. It's been going on for years, like for decades in the news, and this is no different. I guess the one thing I would say is, if there's culpability to be had, which there was, there was a penalty. Every penalty, short of a capital crime, has an end point. There is an end point. And then at the end point, there is a probationary period. Like that's just the way the law works. And so you can say, well, the league's not a law. It's a privilege to be in the league. I get all that. I just felt like at some point there had to be an end point. And then whether teams choose to hire Stan Bowman and Joel Quenneville and Al McIsaac, if they choose to hire them, they do. And then they'll have to deal with the fallback or the fallout of it. But at some point, it had to end. And, Kyle Beach apparently has spoken to the league and given his okay. Am I correct with that, Drakes?
Yeah.
To Quenneville in particular. And so I don't know. I just the real story of how it all came down, and we all have bosses, and if the boss says it's taken care of, eventually you have to go, okay, it's taken care of. Could it have been, should it have been done differently? Of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course. And is there a very clear set of parameters now? Yes. I like to think that there are clear parameters where if your boss says yes in this spot or in something like this, you're not going to just take his word anymore.
Right.
And so, but it was a news dump, came right at the end of the day, and you're driving out to the Cabbage. There's going to be a bunch of stories written about it, I'm assuming, shortly. And as soon as, if somebody hires one of these guys, that there'll be more stories written then. Like, it just doesn't go away. No. It's going to be there, and it'll still need to be addressed by these gentlemen if their opportunity comes.
Yeah. Those are your headlines. Thank you to Tim Hortons.
You asked and we listened. Tim's Retro Donuts are back again for a really limited time. Enjoy classics like Walnut Crunch and Dutchie, and now including Sugar Twist and Blueberry Sour Cream. Get them before they're gone.
It's time for Tim's.
Our interviews on Ray and Dregs are brought to us by Canadian Club 1858 Original, the flagship whiskey for Canadian Club. It's where it all began, aged over 3 years in oak barrels before being bottled. The result, the smoothest possible flavor. That is Canadian Club 1858. So season 6, and there will be a season 6 of Ray and Dregs. Ask Ray and Dregs anything will be top of mind. So that's going to be just a real focus item for us as we launch another season of Ray and Dregs. So it's been a good run, my friend. Season 5 in the books. I think we did close to 80 episodes this year, Ray. 80 episodes.
How did they get 80
So
past us? Who's in charge of that?
yeah, well, it's the evil Emperor Ryan Rashog.
Right now, shanking balls on the range.
That's a terrible word.
Oh, did you see Tin Cup?
I did. Yeah,
When Kevin Costner is shanking the ball on the range.
Yeah.
That's Rashog right now.
Yeah.
And Randeen's like, take your tees, put them in your left pocket. Take your coins, flip them on the ground.
That's exactly what's going on. All right, buddy, you got some summer plans, lots of golf, a little vacay with the family. Yeah.
Played yesterday, playing this morning, playing tomorrow.
Nice.
It's golf season. We do have a couple of family things on the go, but we can't start until development camp ends for the Canucks, and that's on Saturday. So Saturday is official vacation time.
Excellent.
Looking forward to it. Have a safe drive out to the Cabbage.
Thank you.
Have a great summer. Don't tell anyone you're there, so they won't. So nobody will visit, and you'll have a great summer. So to everyone, thank you for listening for season 5, and we love doing the pod. We like and love that you guys listen, and hope you all have a great summer, and we'll see you in the fall.
Well said. And thank you to our sponsors who support Ray and Dregs, make this podcast possible. Our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey, thank you. And Tim Hortons, thank you as well. Season 5, a ton of fun. Hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be back in fall. So look forward to season 6 of the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. In the meantime, have a safe and wonderful summer, everybody.